Umberto Eco, who's just hasn't died yet, but the last book he's put out is called On Ugliness. It's a beautiful book because it's got great quotes and lovely pictures, all that you need. Eco identifies Christianity, particularly Augustinian Christianity, which is this, as ushering in a new philosophy of aesthetic, a pancalistic vision. Everything is beautiful vision. Not only is the world beautiful in creation, it is more beautiful in its redemption by Christ, who embraces on the cross that which is even most appallingly ugly, sin, and transforms it into the utter beauty of love. I can't explore this here as I would like. Let me simply provide two examples: Grunewald's Isenheim altarpiece and the famous account of Mother Teresa's first encounter with a dying person in the streets of Calcutta, both of which will provide, if you will, a drama of the ugly. So here's an aside. This is, I don't know if anyone's been to Isenheim. It's one of the places that I have on my must-go-on pilgrimage. Isenheim was the location of a monastery dedicated to the care of people who were suffering from St. Anthony's fire. It was a disease that was very common in the Middle Ages, brought on by ergot, which is a kind of a rot that is on plants. And they would eat it and it would infect them, and it was a grotesque thing. And they called it St. Anthony's fire. And they were cared for by Augustinians. In the chapel of this monastery, dedicated to Antonites, the community of Antonites. In this chapel dedicated to the chapel of this hospital, dedicated to the care of these sick people, Grunewald, in the 15th century, was commissioned to produce this masterpiece called the Isenheim altarpiece. Now, I don't have it all. I have a whole other, it's worth the whole lecture tonight, so we're going to have to be really brief about it. It's an altarpiece that is extraordinarily clever. It opens up in three different ways, right? So at one point, you've got the statues of St. Anthony and on the front and St. John, and then it opens up, and then you see this altarpiece, that is there. And on either side, there's who's over on this side? There's St. Anthony over on this side, and I forget who's on that side, and it's blocked. But what I want you to see is that on this, look at the predella at the lower part, and look at the grotesque Christ. St. Thomas Aquinas says that you can have a beautiful picture of an ugly thing. And I think immediately of Grunewald. It's magnificent, and it's awful. Okay? How awful is it? Look at the hand. Look at the feet. It's really bad. It's ugly. Something that should be there isn't. The color of life. Something that shouldn't be there is a nail, blood. And the predella at the bottom is very interesting. The predella is the part that's just above the altar. This is right behind the altar. So all the people who were suffering from this disease would come and find themselves daily sitting before this. And if you look at the body of Christ, he is covered with the markings that are typical pathology of St. Anthony's fire. In other words, if you had that disease, you look like that. And even more, look at where the division is. Like leprosy, much of the treatment of St. Anthony's fire involved amputation. So there, the person looking there would see represented right to him or her, Christ bearing the same exact marks of the disease they were suffering with. Here at the, and this is on another one of the panels of the temptation of St. Anthony, you see one of the demons that's tempting Anthony, and his body just reflects the bloating, the swelling, the putrefaction that would have come with this disease, which was terminal. Okay. But look at then what happens. At a certain part of the year, Easter, the predella opens up. And this appears. And what we see is this magnificent vision of beauty. Right? This fame, that Jesus that I was showing you before, the risen Christ, that's there on the side. Now, the narrative story within this piece of art is magnificent. And as I said, it's a beautiful lecture all on its own. But I want you to note one thing. That predella never opens. That means that all the people that are there, that are standing beside the smell, the stench, the pain of that disease, at the very lowest level, always see Christ one with them. And then when they raise their eyes, as they do at the elevation of the Eucharist, they see where they are with Christ in glory, in the mystery of the Blessed Virgin Mary, with the angels appearing from above. That is the drama of the ugly when it becomes the drama of the goodness of Christ, the Christo Kagathon. That beautiful body is what those with horrible bodies see as the deep reality of who they are becoming and what they shall be. The same happened with Mother Teresa. The famous story of the first man that she picked up. Rotting, maggot-eaten, rejected. Something there that shouldn't be there. I find maggots repulsive, right? And the man said to her, "Why are you doing this?" And she said, "Because you are Christ, my brother, and I love you." In both of these cases, we see that the category of beautiful and ugly is transformed when in relation to the Christokagathon. Note I said transformed in relation. I did not say relativized by. There's nothing relative here. St. Anthony's fire is grotesque. A man dying eaten by maggots is appalling and ugly and repulsive and turpidia. What is given, however, as foundation is Christ as the reality, the image and clarity of God. Both the aesthetic object and the perceiving subject are understood in relation to Christ. Does the object more or less impede the perception of Christ as its foundation? Is the subject attuned to the perception of Christ, the goal? I'm going to footnote. I taught for many years at Newman world religions and used the book of, I was going to say St. Benedict XVI, and I wouldn't be wrong, called Truth and Tolerance. When asked about the salvific quality of other religions, can one be saved by being a Muslim? Pope Benedict says, I have no access to the answer to that. I'm not God. All I have access to is the history. And I have to ask one question. Does that historical form of human religiosity, because remember there's only one vera religione, we are not one pace. This is one of the most disastrous things that has emerged in the new papacy, actually. Forget all the other stuff. Is this idea that Christianity is a religion among other religions. It is not. It is religion, the way that God adheres himself to us and us to God. The rest are expressions of the human religious longing and can be evaluated as, do they more or less allow Christ to become present? So some religions are ruled off because by their teaching they deny the reality of Christ is. Others have dimensions that might allow one to see the presence of Christ at work in the world. Well, they have dimensions, though, that block that. And I'm just arguing that this is the way of understanding and evaluating objective things out there and the condition of people who are seeing it. In order to perceive correctly beauty, one has to be in Christ in order to see how that which is before us and within us and in our reaction to us expresses Christ. Whew! That is the stuff of adventure and drama. That's living in the world in a Christ way. And so we can finally turn to the 19th canto of the Purgatorio of Dante. You say, finally, I have no idea what time it is. How you doing? I'm going to drop the last bit, which is my favorite part, but I've written this in 4 parts. You've done part 1, which is beauty and ugly. Part 2, the Christokagathon and Thomas's approach to it. And now we come to part 3, which is looking to the Purgatorio as in the light of what we just talked about. Remember, Mother Teresa and Grunewald, a good action and a beautiful art object, to ask, how is the Purgatorio an expression of this? Well, that's huge. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to do a disservice and only talk about one of the cantos. The simplest way to introduce Dante's Purgatorio, or Purgatory, from his Commedia, that's what he called it. He never called it the Divine Comedy. They call, after he died, they said, this is the Divine Comedy. And comedy doesn't mean, ha 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 ha. Comedy means, ha 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 ha, wonderful. This is joy. Look at how it turns out. Comedy is what I experienced last Sunday when the Eritrean community, all of whom are displaced, who have suffering unbelievable, who have come from camps that have displaced them. Their country is torn apart by a dictator that is brutal and cutting down and abusing their reality, and have found themselves displaced here. They celebrated Mass for 3 hours, and that included dancing. 3 hours I got to sleep through the homily, because it was all in Guise. And so I just, and woke up. But then you have to wake up because they're dancing. And the priest directs the dancing, and it's all very, very deliberate and stately. And then it bursts into this wild joy of ululating. You know, they ululate, right? I can't do it. But I do it every Sunday when we're singing, Hallel. We're ululating. Did you know that? Hallelujah. The word Hallel is the sound of an ululation. It's an onomatopoeic, like buzz for a bee. So when you praise, in Hebrew, Hallel, you're ululating. Hallel. Hallelujah. Praise to God. This joy that bursts out. That's what comedy is. Joy, because the end is a happy ending. The simplest way to introduce it is to say that it belongs, along with Paradise Lost, the Canterbury Tales, and the Wreck of the Deutschland, to the list of epic poems essential to having lived a reflective life. Besides giving the newborn country of Italy 6 centuries later its language, Dante is the only pope, I think, ever to have merited a papal encyclical entitled In Praeclara Summorum, of Pope Benedict XV. This on the 600th anniversary of Dante's death in 1921. His name was Giacomo della Chiesa. He used to say, sono un gargoglio nella bellezza di Roma. I am a gargoyle in the midst of the beauties of Rome. He wasn't the most handsome man imaginable, but he was a saint. He won't be proclaimed because he burned his life out trying to prevent and then walk through the hell of the First World War. Pope Della Chiesa wrote, up here, though he is separated from us by centuries, Dante still has the freshness of a poet of our time, certainly more modern than some of those of recent days who have exhumed the paganism banished forever by Christ's triumph of the cross. Nihil de novi sub solum. You think postmodernism is new? There's nothing post about modernism. It's just an intensification of the modern. There's nothing post. It's modernity. Gone crazy. There breathes in Alighieri the piety that we too feel, the faith that has the same meaning for it. It is covered with the same veil, the truth given to us from on high by which we are lifted so high. That is his great glory, to be the Christian poet, to have sung with divine accents those Christian ideals which he so passionately loved in all the splendor of their beauty, feeling them intimately and making them his life. Boy, those were the days when popes knew how to write. I think that we shall see in this shamefully abbreviated reflection on Dante that's going to come on now, that Dante is, as Pope Benedict named him, Christianis sapientiae laudatorum et preconum unum omnium eloquentissimum, the most eloquent singer of Christian wisdom. The Purgatorio is unique in the Divine Comedy, which is three parts: hell, purgatory, and heaven. Inferno, purgatorio, paradiso. In that while the structure of hell, inferno, and heaven, paradiso, are rather conventional. All right? There was no imagination really required by him as he organized hell and heaven. Purgatory, however, shaped as an Antipodean mountain island upon which souls ascend in their purgation of their sins to the Garden of Eden, there we go, up there, is all his own. Contemporary ecclesial imagination, the church at the time, saw purgatory rather one-dimensionally as punitive, if ultimately temporary, kind of hell. For Dante, inspired by his own experience of faith, shaped by his thorough reading of the classics, and most importantly, informed by deep study of Augustine and Aquinas, purgatory is a place of deliberate encounter with, penance for, and purification of the 7 sins which are the distortion of divine love. The sins are all understood as distortions of divine love. You see at the bottom there's the first few cantos are all filled with the stories of the outside, the gates of purgatory. But when one enters into purgatory, there you have the 7 sins. Starting at the bottom, this is in Italian, superbia, pride, invidia, envy, ira, anger, accidia. It's important to know that the Italians still maintain the right word. We call it sloth. Terrible translation, another talk. Acedia, then avarice, and then gola, gluttony, eating too much. And then finally, luxuria, lust, lasciviousness. And all of them are understood as of 3 classes of breaking love. The first 3, pride, envy, and anger, is the class of love perverted, of distorted love. Love defective is acedia, or sloth. And then the upper 3 are love excessive, excessively loving the wrong things. Avarice, gluttonous, and the lustful are all found in these places. And on each of these levels, as Dante journeys through them, he finds his own freedom as one of the 7 P's that's on his forehead. He's got 7 P's. For peccato, which means sin, is wiped away from his mind and his being. Think of purgatory, and this is a suggestion of the commentator Wilson, as an experience of going to confession. Remember, Dante is a Catholic. So there's nothing abstract or merely psychological about this purgation. It's an encounter with the reality of sinners, with his own sins, and most of all, with the mercy of God made flesh, real flesh, in the child of Mary, who's the constant presence to his journey as a penitent among penitents. They marvel at him because he's alive. They are just shadows. But he still is a penitent with them. Remember, Purgatorio begins when? Easter morning. It's a deep experience, therefore, of the victory of the great act of love, the passion, death, and resurrection of Christ. So it explicitly manifests the beauty that comes from the Christokagathon, the Christ, whose goodness and beauty. By the 19th canto, and now if you pull out those sheets, and if you don't have some, share it, I've given you the translation that comes from the classic 1939 translation, which is published by Oxford Press by John D. Sinclair, in which he doesn't even attempt to turn it into rhyme like Wordsworth did, and I don't like Wordsworth because it ends up being Wordsworth and not Dante. And there is this new translation by Gene Hollander, and Robert Hollander is magnificent, and I would suggest it if you were to ever get one. It's rather thick, but it's got copious notes, and it's got the Italian on one side and the English rendered in triplicate form because it's terza rima. That means in the Italian, the rhyme is at the end of the first and the third word all the time. Remember, he's creating. I mean, anybody that is Italian knows Dante. He's the great founder of the culture in a real sense. But that's a very good book. I've given you the translation that comes from the 1939. By the 19th canto, Dante has not yet passed through the penitential terrace, the middle one, of Acedia. Okay? Where a throng of penitents are urged on, because sloth is what they have to do penance for. So they are being provoked. Haste, haste, lest time be lost for little love. And they respond with that zeal in well-doing may make grace come green again. The penance for Acedia, little love, loving little, is zeal for well-doing. Confessional wisdom that I embrace. Along with the Psalms, I like handing out little cards with 10 spaces to fill in with 10 potential good deeds to be dropped in the collection basket at Mass. Okay? Love little, do some loving. No rosaries from me. Powerful, but you don't get Mary. It's not a penance to say the Hail Mary. It's a joy. Dante is tired out, however, as are my people coming. Well, I got 7 done. Does that mean I'm not forgiven? And I go, no. I know as a pastor and a confessor, I have to give something that you can accomplish. So yeah, that's good. Very good. Dante's tired out by this energetic penance that he's gone through, and he falls into a dream. A dream that we are told at the beginning of the canto takes place at the coldest at the day when the day's heat, overcome by the earth, can no longer temper the cold of the moon. It's the coldest hour of the day. The day and the hour normally marked in tradition as being a time of abstinence and clear contemplation. And in this dream, Dante will meet the dangers and the remedy he will meet in the journey through the 3 last terraces: avarice, gluttony, and lust. So the dream tells him what is going to haunt him as he goes ahead. Let's take up the dream. So if we just read, let's just read the place where it's bold. There came to me in a dream a woman, stammering, cross-eyed, and crooked on her feet. That's how she looks, with maimed hands and of sallow hue. That's about right. Knock-kneed, bad eyes, and stammering. I gazed at her, and as the sun revives cold limbs benumbed by the night, so my look gave her a ready tongue, and then in a little time made her quite erect, and colored her wan features as love desires. When she had in her speech thus set free, she began to sing so that it would have been hard for me to turn my mind from her. I am, she sang, I am the sweet Siren who beguiled the sailors in mid-sea. So great delight it is to hear me. I turned Ulysses, eager on his way to my song, and he who dwells with me rarely departs, so wholly I content him. Her lips were not yet closed when a lady, holy and alert, appeared beside me to put her into confusion. Oh, Virgil, Virgil, who is this? She said with anger. Virgil is Dante's guide. And he came with his eyes fixed on that honorable one, and he seized the other and laid her bare in front, tearing her clothes, and showed me her belly. That awoke me with the stench that came from her. I turned my eyes to the good master. 3 times at least I have called thee, he said. Rise and come. Let us find the opening by which thou enterest into the next level. The first thing to notice is how this siren arises. She doesn't appear to Dante on his journey. Rather, he dreams her. This is not insignificant for 2 reasons. First reason, whereas the sirens in all the bestiaries, that bestiaries are all the exorbitant creatures that the medievals believed inhabited the world, the siren of the bestiaries made people sleep. That's what they did. Sirens sang people to sleep. They make people sleep. Dante's sleep makes her. Reason is gone when we sleep. Our sense of order and perception is undone, and that which censors our images is quietened, right? And we mate in the free play of imagination, our imagination and our consciousness unpacking itself with abandon. All that is left is a kind of seeing that can easily be reshaped by a primal desire to see, as he says, as love wills, comme amor vuol, as love desires when love desires to desire and possess. This is a vital point in our reflection on the subjectivity of the encounter with the ugly. Reason, when lulled to sleep by unregulated desire, can do more than make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. It can make something essentially perverse into something lovable. Something foul can even be misperceived as something fair. This is the ape of the drama of the ugly that happens in Christ. This is not a case of the ugly being transformed by divine love, but this is ugly being misapprehended by disordered love, which thereby becomes trapped by the ugly. Anyway, Pope Benedict is right as saying is Dante is more modern than the primal desiring of paganism. For Dante sees the absolute danger of human subjectivity left alone before the world, shaping the world with a love disordered by excess. That's what happens to us. We are so flush with experience. We have so much excessive possessions that we live in the world easily that transforms by our disordered affections into something beautiful when it is ugly. What happens when my look gave her a ready tongue? That's what he says. My look gave her a ready tongue, and then in a little time made her quite erect and colored her wan features as love desires. One becomes trapped by the very act of remaking something stammering, cross-eyed, and crooked into something with integrity, proportion, and clarity. Get it? This woman is seen as stammering. She is seen as cross-eyed and crooked, which is the inversion of that which has integrity, proportion, and clarity. When she's had her speech thus set free, she begins to sing, so that it would have been hard for me to turn away my mind from her, he says. The modern world sees this, as does the postmodern, which is but an intensification of the modern. But the modern world cannot free itself from this making something ugly beautiful according to disordered love. Because the modern world sees this as the eminent, inevitable story of life reflected in all the art that it produces, and the art that makes it despair. As the postmodern writer Frédéric Beigbeder says, la beauté finit en laideur. Le destin de la jeunesse est d'être flétrie. La vie n'est qu'un lent pourrissement. Nous mourrons chaque jour. Beauty ends in ugliness. The destiny of youth is to be withered. Life is only a slow decay. We die every day. How else can it be for those who set out on a postmodern journey to nowhere? Determined by evolution as ultimately meaningless, an ultimately meaningless world, all that is left is to stoically impose some beauty on what ultimately rots. Yet Dante is awakened from this deceitful dream by a donna santa, a lady holy and alert, whose anger, she's angry, rouses Virgil, who, keeping his eye on this honesta, this honorable one, it rouses him to intervene, and who lays bare the front of this woman, this dream, this siren, and showed me her belly. That awoke in me the stench that came from her. The Italian is brilliantly earthy. L'altra prendea dinanzi l'apri affendendo I drappi e mostravami il ventre che mi sveglio col puzzo che n'uscia. It's great. Puzzo is one of those great Italian words like right? Che puzza. What? That stinks. That's awful. That's what you get when like you go into a spaghetti factory and they put something in front of you and you go, ma che cos'è questo? Questo non è pasta, questo è puzzo. Dante's is able to see the reality of this ancient witch, and her stench awakens him to reality. There is nothing of beauty. He had only clothed it as such. Reality comes crashing in on his senses. Col puzza neuscia. But reality does come upon doesn't come upon him as it does for the Begbie and the postmodern. It does not show Dante that the journey is simply ugly and meaningless. Completely the opposite. And here is the vital second point of the dream of the siren. This dream is not real. It's not part of the journey. And he's making it as a penitent on his viaggio, his voyage. The dream itself is a kind of ugliness. It's something that should not be there. It's not part of the essential reality of the penitential ascent. But something that is an essential part attends to Dante. The lady, holy and alert. Who is she? Scholars battle over that. Oh, and I'm back ahead of myself. Who is the Donna Santa? Is she Beatrice? Is she St. Lucy? Is she the Blessed Mother? That's who's actually in this picture here. You can see that it's the Blessed Mother that's the one that unveils. But all of them do hover over, these women always do hover over the journey of Dante with, bright wings, as Hopkins said. But Hopkins said this of the Holy Spirit, and this, I think, is what this deliberately named honest one is, whom Dante presents as waking Dante to the real. The woman is passionate grace, angry grace. The mercy of God rushes into the dream of despair of Dante that he will find confronting himself at every terrace. He's going to be haunted by this all the way through avarice, gluttony, and lust, and will fill him with misgivings. He's told, as we read here, "What ails thee?" Third line, third paragraph from the bottom. "What ails thee?" He's been freed. "What ails thee that keeps thou gazing on the ground?" my guide began to me when we both inclined a little above the angel. And I, with such misgivings, a new vision makes me go, which bends me so to itself that I cannot give up thinking upon it. He's troubled by what he has seen revealed to him, that his sight is mistaken and turns what is ugly into something beautiful. "Thou sawest," he is told, "that ancient witch, Antica Strega, Antica Strega, who alone is now wept for above us. Thou sawest how man is freed from her. Let it suffice thee, and strike thy heel on the ground. Turn thine eyes to the lure which the eternal King spins with great wheels." Haunted by this fear that he cannot but be distorted by his desires to find security through acquisition and possession of earthly things, Dante is met by the action of grace. Grace understands completely the drama of living haunted in a false dream pleasure. Indeed, even that old witch, even that broken, repulsive thing is mourned for in heaven. It finds meaning above. And it is towards that which is above, or better yet, who is above, that Dante will be given by grace the ability to put his heels on the ground and turn his eyes, his whole perception, to the lure which the eternal King spins. The result of grace grounding Dante in that which is above results in an encounter with reality that produces the opposite of the nihilistic pourrissement, decay, and rot of the tough postmodern. Produces the opposite. It is given, as we read it is given to us as like the falcon which looks first to its feet, then turns to the call and stretches forward through the desire for food that draws it there. Such I became. Dante is given a set of wings. This is the discovery of the Christian, of grace, the grace of reality. As another Pope Benedict, Papa Ratzinger, put it, I'd like to show young people how beautiful it is to be a Christian. I want to make clear that it's not a burden to be carried by great love and realization, that it's like having wings. Even amidst the ugliness, there is something, someone operating with a meaning that is beautiful. Yet, this way into beauty, Dante tells us, is the way of the beatitude qui lugent. Blessed are those who mourn. And so here we meet the only pope in purgatory. There are 5 in hell. Pope Adrian V. There he is. Adrian represents the penitent who must confront the sin of avarice, wanting to accumulate things, which I note is the sin of the old person, and dare I say, of old institutions. Let's look at the text for a moment, and we're coming now to the end, so hang right in there. On the other side, we have the story of the penitential pope. And I will find it down in here somewhere. He said to me, this is the Pope. He asks, who are you? He says, Why heaven turns its back to itself, thou shalt know. Our backs to itself, thou shalt know. But first, know who I was. I was the successor of Peter. Then he tells which family he comes from and where he came from. A month and little more I proved how the great mantle weighs on him that keeps it from the mire, so that all the other burdens seem a feather. My conversion, alas, was too late. But when I was made Roman shepherd, I discovered how lying is life. I saw that there the heart was not at rest, nor was it possible to mount higher in that life, so that love of this kind was kindled in me. Till that moment I was a soul wretched and separate from God, wholly avaricious. Now, as thou seest, I am here punished for it. What avarice does is here declared for the purging of the converted souls. And the mountain has no bitterer pain. Just as our eyes fixed on earthly things did not lift themselves on high, so justice here has sunk them to the earth. They're all lying in the ground in the dust. So justice holds us fast, seized, bound in feet and ankles, as long as it shall please the righteous Lord so long shall we stay motionless and outstretched. And Dante had kneeled and was about to speak. But as soon as I began, Pope Adrian perceived, merely by listening, he didn't see him, that I did him reverence. What cause, he says, has bent thee down thus? And I said, because you're the Pope. And I said to him, because your dignity, my conscience stung me, standing erect. And the Pope says to him, straighten thy legs. Rise up, brother, he replied. Do not err. I am a fellow servant with thee and with the others of the one potentate. Adrian's was one of those really short papacies. 37 days. There's other ones that did, like we have a beautiful piece of music because of a pope who died really quickly. Palestrina's Missa Papa Marcelli, right? He died after 32 days, and Palestrina had written it so we call it the Pope because he had it prepared for his coronation and he ended up using it for his funeral. That's what happens. Just enough time, he died, just enough time to see that his ecclesiastical career of accumulating dioceses and benefices and parishes and wealth, which ended in the supreme position of possessing all that he could desire, was a lying life. 37 days is all it took him. He is tasting the reality of those who, like the psalmist, penitently lie on the ground. There they are. My soul lies in the dust, adhesed anima mea. In the dust, however, he finds the cure to his lying life. In the reality that all is dust, he finds none of the bitterness that nous mourons chaque jour, we die every day. But he discovers the amazing sensitivity that comes from dying to the frantic activity of acquiring. Without seeing, he's sensitive in a new way, this penitential pope. He realizes that Dante is kneeling to him in recognition of his papal dignity and dying even to the dignity of the Petrine office and power he once coveted. He says, straighten your legs, rise up, brother, and do not err. I am a fellow servant with thee and with the others of one potentate. Here is the key to the discovery that even in the short period of his papacy, grace awakened Adrian and saved him from hell. Grace is not a thing, it is a person, una podestate, one potentate. And that potentate is the one who fell over and over again in the dust. 3 times in the purgatory of the Via Crucis, Christ falls, lying in the dust. It is the potentate, the anointed one, Christ, who even in the dust of Adrian's sin looks at Adrian and says to him, "Straighten up thy legs, rise up, brother. I am a fellow servant with thee." And so, weeping gives way to wings. Thank you.